part 2. Okay, so after I got officially certified in vibrational sound therapy, I felt so good about myself for the first time in my life. I felt like I had some sense of purpose and direction. But more than that, I felt like what I was doing was changing me internally, at a deep cellular emotional level. And I also knew that I was only touching the surface. And the other part of me, the very, compassionate, service-oriented part of me was like, this is also beautiful because it's healing you. And now you can do something that gives back into the world. A big part of trauma survivors and people that have CPTSD, or people that have, you shut up, or people that have early developmental trauma or separation trauma, they often deal with this impending doom, this feeling of they're not worthy of anything. They don't have anything to give to the world, and that's simply not true. Oftentimes I say, and I truly believe, the most afflicted have the most to give. The hard part is that they just have to recognize that they're worthy. They're worthy. And then the other hard part is to get through the darkness and to get through the obstacles and to overcome the trauma, to see that by doing that, just by doing that, they can become such a big light to the world, and they can really be of such service to the world. And so that was the first time as a trauma survivor that I recognized that I can actually be of service to the world. That's the part that solidified something in me deeper. That's where sound, I'm like getting emotional. That's where sound really stuck with me. And I knew this thing was going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. I just knew it. Because up until that point, I never felt I was worthy of anything. I never felt I could give to the world in a way that was healing, that meant something, and that somebody else could benefit from. I never thought I had that in me. And so before we got our certification, the teacher, who's wonderful, his name is Jeff, he's incredible, he went around the room and he asked all of us, okay, now you're certified. Now I want to know, what would you want to do with this? The world is your oyster. You can do anything. This modality is so powerful. And in 2016, vibration and sound were not a thing. Now you turn around and it's everywhere. You can't turn a corner without somebody doing a sound bath or something with sound, right? But back then it wasn't. It really wasn't big. So the world was really our oyster. Like, where are we going to go with this? This is so cool. And he went around the room, and I went into my flooded panic. Like, I don't know what the fuck I'm going to do with this. I don't know, but it's amazing. I'm going to have personal clients. I'm going to work on them. I don't know, And then when it got to me, it's just like suddenly my brain shut off, and it's like something else spoke for me. And it looked at my teacher, and I said, I don't know where this is coming from, but I think I want to work with children. And somehow I want to help children through sound. I don't know how. And he was looking at me, he's like, okay. And he was so good. And he was like, in what aspect? And like, and I said, well, my background is social work. And I actually, in college, wanted to work for the welfare of children, obviously. There's something deeply touching to me. And I wanted to really make it help particularly orphan children or children that were not raised with love in some capacity. I didn't know the details of it, but in some capacity I deeply knew this. And so I said, I think with orphan children, I think with children that were given up for adoption, I think with children that have this core abandonment wound in some way, I want to help. And so he told me, I've never heard that, and I think you should. Anyway, this was 2016, yeah. And so I remember leaving there like, what the hell, what are you gonna do? Like, but never give up, because that gem came into my mind in 2016, and somehow I believe God puts this on your heart, really, really, when we're born. We just learn to discover it later on, And so anyway, I okay, for the rest of my time, I worked on getting personal clients. I started on my friends. I did some pro bono, exchanges, and got great feedback. And I started to see, wow, this is deeply healing. This is deeply healing. I was working on friends and family, and they loved what I was doing with sound. And so at that point, I was just working with the bowl specifically on the body, which I believe is one of the most powerful methods. And I was also using the bowls on myself. And it was overwhelming. It was overwhelming, the emotions and things that were coming up. And I started to feel some sense of release. I started to feel like what vibration did for me, what sound did for me, was opened up this slightly box, and suddenly everything I repressed was starting to trickle out a little by little, right? Until it got too overwhelming. And then I closed it back up and I said, focus outward, be the healer. Be the healer now. You have the tools, be the healer. And so I spent the next 10 years putting all my focus on helping others heal trauma and exposing the collective or whatever audience I had to the power of sound. And that was always a vision of mine. I said to myself when I got certified, and I did many courses, I said to myself, I keep learning and studying and learning and studying and learning. What do I want to do? Well, one of my dreams was to expose as many people to sound and vibration as I possibly could. And the other was to work in diverse fields, to learn as much as I could with this modality. Not just one niche, but to work with several different groups. And so that's why I said earlier in the video that I really got a well-rounded education by spreading myself too thin and often being a little bit chaotic. But in the end, I'm grateful for it because what I learned, could fill several books. So I'm very happy for that. And it just empowered me as a practitioner and as an educator in sound now. So, but anyway, and so, I started looking more about 2 years ago, right before I left the U.S. to come back to Croatia. I started really looking into my health and well-being. And I had done everything I wanted to in sound. Everything. Worked with cancer patients, large groups, had my own community, did one-on-one sessions, worked with children, which was like my dream come true, in the school systems, right? Not exactly how I wanted to, but still I did, and I was really proud of this. And I'm like, but where do I go from here, And I kept trying to rebuild from the same script, do the same things over, had the same opportunities, doing the same community stuff. And I'm like, something in me was just like, I just don't want this anymore. Like, I'm giving up on myself, I don't want this anymore, But what I wasn't recognizing was as I was aging and why I was ignoring the symptoms of CPTSD and how bad it was getting, I was getting to a point in my life where if I didn't face what happened to me and if I didn't face my trauma, I was on a downhill slope really bad. And I knew that I had to make a drastic change. And in that moment of suffering, my birth brother from Croatia called me. And this is how interconnected we are. And this is why I like to tie in everything I do, the sacred and the science, because you cannot have one without the other. My brother felt me at an intuitive level. And it first started out as a nice phone conversation, but he actually pulled over from the side of the road because he felt me. And he told me, I don't know why I called you, but I feel like you're just unhappy. Something is wrong and I think you need to come home. And I remember those words because I thought, I don't even know where home is anymore. I don't even know who I am anymore. I don't even know what's going on inside me, And he meant Croatia. Now I understand what he really meant. And maybe he didn't even recognize it at the time. You got to come back to go forward. You've got to recognize what happened to you. You got to face it. You got to grieve it. You got to understand it. You got to heal from it. You got to forgive. And you got to come back stronger. Of course, at the time, I didn't know that. I just saw it as that's the words I needed to hear. And I left everything. And I left a mess. And oftentimes, people with complex trauma, they leave little messes. Little fire, fire, mess, disaster, fire, chaos. Because 9 times out of 10, if you grew up in chaos, you adapt to it. and chaos feels normal to you, and dysfunction feels really normal to you. And so you live your life and you're just leaving chaos all over the place. And so I went back to Croatia, and that's when everything unraveled for me, and I was able to see what I grew up in. I was able to face the pain of the early abandonment wound, which is still the most difficult, and I still have challenges sometimes. But and I did, and that's a long process, and I'm not going to go into all the details here. This is a very long video, and I this is also the chaos of my brain, but this is the only way that I feel I can teach in some authentic way. Some part of me is a storyteller, but some part of me is a storyteller because I have CPTSD. I'm a bit neurodivergent. I got a little bit of ADHD. Instead of trying to mask that and pretend that I'm fully healed, I'm going to try to use it to my benefit, okay? And also, I'm doing these videos because if you followed me, you've known I've taken down my YouTube page multiple times. This is a gift of self-sabotage, of my CPTSD people. This is what we do when we don't think we're worthy. But I realized that I kept stripping down identities that were based in scarcity, that were based in an identity rooted in trauma. And I'm posting those identities up in truth. And this is the closest to truth I've ever been. And I also didn't want to give up. I also wanted to keep talking, because the minute I give up on myself and the minute that I don't show up, I automatically give somebody else permission to do the same. And I don't want to give people permission to give up on themselves. I want people to know that they're worthy of keep trying, even if they feel like they're failing, even if they feel like they have to fail publicly. Do you know how many times I failed publicly? Do you know how many times? Please. Please. But this is it. We resurrect, right? And it's okay. And I think the more people that do this, the more inspiring it is. So I'm always inspired by people that are not afraid to make mistakes, that are not afraid to be vulnerable, that are not afraid to take accountability, that are not afraid to share very dark things. I got sick and tired of seeing the perfect, poised professional up there talking about their self-help and their self-development from this place instead of from this place, And so anyway, gosh, that was a lot of tangents, huh? But I want you to understand me better. And I think as I go down the line, my content will be a bit more structured. But there's a couple of things that I didn't want to lose. When we talk about CPTSD, this is different than PTSD. Let me just make that distinction. PTSD is a single incident trauma. So most notably, we can look at people like war vets, right? They are traumatized by the war. That is a single incident trauma. You can also get PTSD from an abusive relationship that you've been into, or a car accident, a motorcycle accident, a traumatic head injury. That's PTSD, one single incident that causes that. Complex trauma is abuse or trauma sustained over a long period of time. of time. And so this is generally like childhood trauma, right? If you've experienced neglect, abandonment, repeated emotional neglect, abandonment, abuse over a long period of time, it can also be subtle but consistent, enough to change your outlook on the world, enough to shift your brain cells, enough to change the trajectory of your life, enough to form an identity rooted in survival. Yeah, then that's CPTSD. And one thing that's really important to understand is it's a developmental trauma. It's a connection trauma. This is something I really had to understand myself, because when I was looking for therapists and some people to explain this to me, I really didn't understand the root of it. The root of it is actually developmental. So early, your brain, how the brain develops as a child, and lack of connection to your parents, your primary caregivers, where that connection was not able to solidify, develop, you weren't able to create bonds. And that can be from a lot of children that are given up for adoption, a lot of children that are born into parents that are addicts. This is a separation. They lack the connection and that very, very important bonding that you get with the mother when a baby is an infant. That is absolutely detrimental to the development of that child, of the brain, of the capacity to give and receive love. Now, I don't want to scare you. With that being said, it does not mean you will be afflicted with this for the rest of your life. This is really, really important to understand. What I have learned is that pre-understanding of complex trauma, I assumed and I accepted, that's very important, that I would be a person that would never be able to connect emotionally or deeply with anybody, that I would never be able to love, to give or receive love truly, that I would never be able to live with an open heart, to be compassionate, to be nurturing, or to be motherly in any way. I checked all of these off my list. So, oh well, this is it. You know, you just accept that you're going to have to live your life around this somehow. And that is so wrong. Please believe, if you have early separation trauma, if you have developmental trauma, if you are diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, a diagnosis is not a life sentence. It does not mean that you are incapable of love and connection. In fact, it can mean just the opposite. I'm a person that's a firm believer in God, and I believe as a reflection of God, we already have this divine love in us. And trauma is the lie that tells us we don't. And so know that as you're healing yourself, don't get lost in fantasy, because this can be very easy for complex trauma people. We can go off in fantasy and be like, oh, I'm divine and healed and loved. I've done this a million times. You have to understand that you have to take practical steps to help yourself, but be rooted in the love of something higher for you. And that's always been there, and you just have to uncover it. It's going to take time. So it turns out I am actually a really loving, really nurturing, really open-hearted person. I never knew that existed. Believe it or not. And so I think you are too. So there's a lot of pages out there and doctors and things like this, and that will paint CPTSD to be something so serious and depressing and dark and all of these things. And what I don't want to do is I don't want to take away, sorry, what's going on with my screen? I don't want to take the seriousness away from the symptoms of CPTSD, and I don't want to invalidate your experience because you have CPTSD, because something very traumatic and awful happened to you that you didn't deserve. That's number one. But number two, I also want to impose that just because we have these things, it doesn't mean our life is over. And it doesn't mean that we can't experience joy and love and sensuality and all the other aspects of life that is our divine birthright. And so I choose to show a happier, kind of lighthearted experience of CPTSD, because I want to take the pressure off of you. You know why? Because you've been carrying toxic shame your whole life, and you don't deserve that. It was given to you. And by the way, I learned in sound therapy that emotions are vibrations, right? And there are natural vibrations or emotions that flow through our body that are inherently ours as a child. And that's happiness, sadness, anger, all of these. Shame is not one of them. Nope. Shame is not organic to the human experience. Shame is something that's put on us outside. So we don't produce shame. So that means it's like a poison in the system. And it's not inherently you. So know that. We can get rid of it. We can expose it for what it is. We can get rid of it. We don't have to carry it. And we can replace that shame with deep, deep love, starting with ourselves, okay? And so I want to put a compassionate face to CPTSD. Yeah, that's a good one. I want to put a compassionate face to CPTSD, so you know there's nothing wrong with you. What happened to you was unfortunate and unfair, but it is not a life sentence. Trust and believe. This conversation did start with Tim Fletcher, right? But I feel like I had to explain all of that to come back around. Anyway, when I was finally ready to face my shizit, my CPTSD, I was looking because I didn't have enough money. I didn't have money to get a therapist. I didn't have enough money to really look into anything. I was like in complete cycle of victimization and codependency like a mother. And so I needed to help myself. And so I went to YouTube. And what happens in YouTube? It can be extremely overwhelming. By the grace of God, I found Tim Fletcher. And he was the one that I could relate to the most. He was the one that I was learning from. I was understanding myself better. And this is why I say use discernment when you're looking to understand yourself and to know about CPTSD and to know about trauma, specifically childhood trauma. Tim Fletcher, look at his history. This is how I don't want you to suffer, so I want to make things easier. He, for somewhere over 30 years, he's been a pastor. Now, this is important for me. I don't know if it's important for you, but the man is rooted in God, and that means something to me. And I believe that no matter what you believe, you should try to have faith in a higher power, that there is something greater that loves you deeply. And so it's not that he gets preachy, but I like that he is a man rooted in this foundation of God. And so, but he was a pastor that helped, that worked with as an addictions counselor. And so he helped people struggling with addiction, and he specialized in dealing with people from dysfunctional families. And he did this for 20, 30 years. And he started to talk to more and more people with addiction, and he started to piece things together. I like people who do this. And he started to understand there's got to be a core root to alcoholism, substance abuse. There's got to be a core root to addiction, but what is it? And that he started to notice that all of these addicts had one thing in common. They all came from some kind of dysfunctional background or some family environment where these children did not feel safe, seen, secure, protected. They were neglected, abused. There was some kind of root cause within the childhood, the connection, the development of that child that led that child to addiction. So then he made the connection that people with addiction actually have complex trauma. There's a root and a cause to everything, right? And so think about an addiction, what that is. It is a form, a toxic form of connection. It is codependency. It's something that you need, right? You need, and it acts as a form of connection. It is an attachment. It's unhealthy, right? And you'll learn what's healthy love, what's healthy attachment, and all this stuff. And so they use that to replace what they didn't receive in childhood. Make sense? And so when we think of addiction, a lot of times we think of alcohol, we think of substance, we think of drugs, things like this. But addiction comes in many forms: sex, shopping, social media, addiction to validation, attachments, just to people making you feel better. I mean, this goes beyond, And what it really is connection. That is the core root of people that suffer from complex trauma. There's a disconnect in connection, and that's what helps you grow in love and thrive. And so when I started to watch Tim Fletcher, he broke down topics in a very simple way. And this is something that I tried to do with sound. I tried to break things up very simple, not because I think people are stupid, but I think we learn better when we think like children and when we're taught like children. I don't need the big fancy terms. I don't need all that bullshit. Make me understand. Make me understand. That's it. Simple. And so Tim Fletcher does that, and he speaks with compassion. He has a compassionate voice. Again, there's something nurturing and fatherly about him. And even though the subjects that he talks about are heavy and you might get overwhelmed, especially if you're new into discovering CPTSD and childhood trauma, but just hear it out. He also doesn't do this thing that I hate, which is separation. A lot of doctors and so-called psychologists out there, they are still under separation consciousness. Well, they will pit one group against the other. I knew one thing in my healing. I did not want to demonize my family, and I did not want to demonize myself. I had lived in separation consciousness my whole life because this is what trauma does, and I was fucking done with it. And I wanted somebody that had compassion to bridge all the gaps for me. Even though these people abused you, even though they were wrong, can you understand where they came from? Can you understand what led them to these actions? Can you understand what they lacked in their own childhood? And so that's what Tim Fletcher does for me. And it's very, very important as a trauma survivor to stay away and be very discerning from things that will cause separation within you. Okay, you have enough separation. You're trying to pull the pieces back. You're trying to make everything whole again, so you can be who you're truly meant to be under all that broken glass from trauma, all the lies, you know, that it tells you. And so what I'm going to do is under these videos, I'm going to list links for Tim Fletcher. He's got great programs if you're financially able to pay for his online programs. I think they're definitely worth it. But if you're not financially stable and you can't do that, he has got oodles of videos, I mean, on dysfunctional family upbringing. I mean, just take a look at all of his stuff. He's a fascinating man to listen to. He's educated. He's truly done his research. He doesn't just read books. He spent, 20, 30 years with addicts and people that suffered from serious trauma. And you want to direct yourself towards people that have actually experienced it or dealt with people that have gone through it. And that's where the discernment should be. There's a lot of shit on YouTube nowadays. And also you have to realize a complex trauma brain can easily slip into fantasy. And so we got to be careful to come back down to reality and say, what's actually helping me? What's helping me escape? What's actually going to help me? Might feel a little bit more uncomfortable, but it's going to help me. So I'll leave all his information below. And I hope this scattered, lovely 2-part video was enough to let you know where I'm at, why I don't give up, why I want to help, and why I keep showing up here. And it's also a platform, please reach out. If there's something I want to continue to be sort of a face of CPTSD so that, you have permission to also enjoy your life, to smile, to feel good, and to talk about these things without shame. That's the thing. So I want to be that for you. And if you want me to discuss anything important, just put it out there. I intend to post educational stuff, but I intend to also be my funny, weird, warlock, witchy self also, which I love to be. And I think the biggest part of recovering from complex trauma is knowing that there is a whole beautiful person inside of there, and discovering that person can be really, really fun. But the acceptance of that person is everything. Okay. Anyway, I think I've chatted enough, and so these are going to be my intros. And I'll talk more about where I am in life and what I'm doing now, and then I will also share some practical tools that can help you with nervous system regulation, because that is going to be the key, I tell you, to healing and recovering from complex trauma, is to understand where it comes from, to be able to look at your own stuff, do the shadow work, but to also take the practical steps to heal yourself. And I want you to know that you are deeply empowered and you are deeply powerful, and don't believe the hype, because the hype out there will tell you that you need this and that, and you're still sick and you're not mentally well, and that is simply not fucking true. All right. See you soon, guys.